A poll question. What is your affiliation with the organization? Is it a state agency, a water or utility, a wastewater utility, municipality, county, community-based group, or other nonprofit partners? Who do you represent today? We're going to give this a few minutes. Don't be shy. All right, we're just waiting for the results to come up. Okay, so we have 11% for state agencies, 18% for water or wastewater utility, 37% for the municipalities, no county, no community-based groups, and 34% are other nonprofit partners. Got a nice group today. So I want to introduce you to Lee Clark with New Jersey Future, who's going to be our wonderful moderator today. Take it away, Lee.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And it's great to be here today. And I want to thank everyone for coming out today for this very special program that both Jersey Waterworks and New Jersey Future and our sponsors are proud to host today. So just to give you further introduction of who I am, my name is Lee Clark, and I am the program manager of New Jersey Future's Funding Navigator program, a program that we just launched back in April 26, 2023. So it is a very new, very fresh, very innovative program that we are proud to launch, and we're ready to talk with folks. But to provide further context of today's events, exactly what is the main focus? From there, then we'll go into some of the obstacles that we're facing as both water utility operators, public officials, and general advocates. And then from there, we will then go into the panelists. And each panelist will have 7 minutes to explain more about their background, what their organization does, and has to offer to each person that has chosen to attend today's event. So as we all know, water infrastructure is one of the most costly aspects here in New Jersey for municipalities and water system operators. Attached to it is a $30 billion price tag over the next 20 years to upgrade our entire water system. This includes everything from replacing lead pipes to addressing water contaminants such as PFAS. So we need to be ready for the next generation of challenges, and also making sure that we're keeping up with climate change and making sure that our infrastructure is sustainable, up to date, and serving the public to the best abilities as possible. So many of y'all may have seen the blog that New Jersey Future has posted. It's on our website, but it goes into greater detail. It's essentially with the obstacles that we're facing. We need a way to fund these projects. And we see that a lot of money is coming from the federal government and coming into the states. We're seeing millions upon millions of dollars being invested into water infrastructure, an unprecedented amounts that was signed into law through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the American Rescue Plan through President Biden. So with what we're talking about today is technical assistance and making sure that our most under-resourced water systems and municipalities have a equal and inclusive chance of getting the funds they need. Research has shown that our most underserved and our most overburdened communities have traditionally and historically not been able to get as much of the funding as other places have, whether it's because of the size of the municipality and water system being too small and having challenges to access these funds, or lacking the staff capacity to follow up on application review, outreach to their communities, follow up with professionals, either consultants or government officials, to essentially push through their application. So for this process, we want to make sure that we're helping the water systems, the operators, and the municipalities that are at most need get the fair share of funding that they need, because they will have the biggest costs that they're going to need assistance for. And this is done through aspects of low interest loans or principal forgiveness, where low interest loans can then turn into grants for municipalities and water systems that are eligible for such things. So with that providing a background, it is our goal to help navigate these folks to this avenue. And we're seeing a lot of technical assistance programs popping up today, which is a necessity to help these water systems and municipalities get the funding that they need. So we spoke about some of the challenges and obstacles, whether it's staffing capacities, time, or just having the general relationships needed. And so now you're going to hear from a number of experts today on this amazing panel who come from different walks of life, who offer different perspectives of how do we tackle this problem essentially, and how do we make it a more inclusive process, and how do we ensure that all these millions of dollars of federal dollars coming into the state through the State Revolving Fund is being accessible to all the communities that need it. So I don't want to take up any more time, but I do want to remind folks that if you have any questions, please insert them into the chat. We encourage people to ask questions. And then later on in the program, when the panelists are finished, I will be pulling the questions from the chat, introducing them to the panelists, and then having them answer these questions for everyone, so we can make this the most educational experience possible for the folks here in attendance today. So without further ado, I do want just to remind the panelists they have 7 minutes to introduce themselves, their organization, and what exactly the services they are offering to the folks that are in most need, and what kind of technical assistance services are there to be available. So the first person I want to bring up, well, not bring up, but introduce, is Denise. So Denise, you're on.
Thank you so much, Lee. And thank you all for this opportunity to introduce EPIC, our organization, and talk about the service we're providing in New Jersey. A little background on me: I'm based here in Wisconsin. EPIC is a national nonprofit, so we have folks based across the country. And I am, a little background on me, I'm a former regulator. I was for almost 10 years with our state of Wisconsin's Public Service Commission. So we oversaw the rates, the customer service standards, and major projects for roughly 580 utilities here in the state. And only one of them was investor owned. So the vast majority of my work has involved municipal utility throughout my career, municipal utility and public planning work. I'm also a former elected official and plan commission chair, so have that local perspective, and was very excited for the opportunity to join EPIC, whose mission is to build policies that deliver spectacular improvement in environmental progress, and that is to benefit both nature and people. Our work includes initiatives and teams who work on habitat restoration and mitigation, water quality partnerships with producers and municipal partners, leveraging technology for improved environmental stewardship. And then the largest team at EPIC, the water team, I'm a part of that water team, and that is the team that has launched this funding navigator in partnership with others. Our water team's work is focused on water equity. That is eliminating disparities between systems and municipalities in terms of access to safe, reliable, affordable service, and then removing barriers for, as Lee mentioned, the underserved, overburdened communities. Our work is informed by research on national research on SRFs between 2011 and 2020. Lee touched on this, but at the national level, our studies indicated that while municipalities with more water quality violations and lower median incomes are statistically more likely to receive assistance, and this is a very good thing, the smaller and more racially diverse communities were less likely to apply and receive assistance. So we've looked at both the drinking water and the clean water side of the SRF programs and found that to be the case. On the drinking water side, it was about 7% of drinking water systems accessing the SRFs. That represents about 30% of the population served. And on the clean water side, it's about 5.5% of all US municipalities receiving a clean water SRF award. Again, nationwide, and we understand different states have different outcomes, but these were national studies that have helped informed our work. Next slide, please. So why our focus on water equity? Well, we at EPIC, like those of you on the call, believe everyone should have access to safe, reliable, affordable water, regardless of where they live, their socioeconomic status, and demographic factors. So how do we go about addressing the existing inequities? Well, as we've heard EPA articulate many times in recent months, changing the odds for communities that need access to funding and assistance for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. So our work at EPIC to achieve this goal is comprised of 3 efforts. First, we provide technical assistance, which is what we're talking about here today, informed by that data and research. And that's connecting those utilities and communities to funding and experts. Our data and research involves tracking, analyzing, and building a case for policy reforms, and also connecting and informing our technical assistance. And then we do work supporting those who advocate for innovation and policy change to ensure equitable distribution of funds. Next slide, please. So with our technical assistance, we are using a funding navigator model. I know there are funding navigators for broadband, all sorts of access to infrastructure funding, different issue areas. Our funding navigator is based on improving that access for water, wastewater, stormwater. Our approach to technical assistance is to focus on small to mid-sized systems. And through our philanthropic support, we work in collaboration with national and place-based partners. New Jersey Future and Moonshot Missions on this call are some of our partners, and we're enormously grateful for the support of those partners. We launched the Navigator last year and presently have engagements going in the Mid-Atlantic, specifically in the Delaware River Basin with those philanthropic funds, the Midwest, so Michigan and Chicagoland, and then in the South, our focus is on Mississippi and Arkansas. So our experience in these areas are, helping improve we kind of cross-pollinate across these regions and help improve our efforts in each of those areas. In addition, we're humbled and excited to have been named a National Environmental Finance Center by EPA, which will expand our work outside these regions beginning this summer sometime. Really looking forward to coordinating with states, regional EPA offices, and then the other national and regional EFCs, several of whom you'll hear from in a little bit. And just briefly on our existing funding navigator work, it consists of managers based in each of those 3 regions, as well as a national team whose members have specific expertise and support that they lend to the region. So we're a team whose collective expertise and support includes engineering, finance, operations, community engagement, public health, and regulatory issues. In addition to myself, our team also includes 3 other staff who previously served or presently served as local elected officials. Next slide, please. So our goals with the Funding Navigator are not only to connect more underserved, overburdened communities to public funds for water infrastructure, but also we aim to see better projects financed. And our definition of better means those that are financially sustainable from an operations standpoint, those that are community-centered, faster lead service line replacement, and nature-based solutions, in particular on that wastewater and stormwater side of things. Our goals are, we meet a place where it's at in terms of which of those goals we're focused on. It can be a both and situation or one very specific depending on the needs of that community. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of our general process. More broadly speaking, it involves efficient handoffs. So we have place-based partners and national partners who have expertise in certain areas. EPIC has expertise in other areas, and we will do these we try to broker these efficient handoffs where, depending on what stage of the process we're in. So and we will start at whichever of these boxes makes the most sense. The upper left-hand corner, recruiting utilities who would otherwise be unlikely to access public funds, involves the fact that many of these places are small and underserved, and they have a lot on their plate, and they may not actively go out and find sources of funds. They may not be aware of them. And so raising that awareness is a part of that proactive recruitment. Community engagement, we may come at that proactive recruitment through some of our community partners who are aware of projects that they think would be well served by accessing public funds. And then that upper right-hand corner, you'll hear a little bit from Andy, perhaps on the rapidly diagnosing problems and helping assess which to tackle. That's about seeing what the situation is with the technical, managerial, and financial capacity in that community. Also, you'll see community engagement's a key part of that. What has been the history of community engagement to inform water decisions, and what might that look like depending on the unique needs of that place. And then developing a technical assistance work plan, if you will. And there are a couple trajectories along the way, or spots along this trajectory where a community can make a decision about whether or not to proceed, and how to proceed. And so that's one of them. So matching, if they decide to proceed with a technical assistance work plan, matching those utilities with the professional service providers and the community engagement experts to help address the problems and design projects. And then ultimately, of course, helping them put together the applications for funding from state and federal programs. So our process also, I'll just note, involves asking very early on in the outreach and the screening process if a local government is receiving technical assistance from another organization for the same type of service. So we acknowledge and really value how partnerships and coordination is extremely important here. Our aim is to complement and not duplicate assistance provided by others. So with that, that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Denise. Fantastic presentation. And I'd like to use this time to introduce our next presenter, Andy.
Thanks, Lee. And thanks very much to New Jersey Future for inviting me to participate. I'm Andy Cricken with Moonshot Missions, a nonprofit that's dedicated to serving underserved communities across the country with their water and wastewater challenges. I also want to put a shout out to my friend and colleague, Ayako Tischler, who's on the call with me. So hi, Ayako, thanks for joining. So I wanted to talk about two things. I mean, first, I want to talk about my former role as a wastewater utility manager in New Jersey and how we use the State Revolving Fund in a very effective way. And then I want to talk about how Moonshot is seeking to replicate that. So for many years, I worked at the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, which is the wastewater utility serving Camden City and its suburban municipalities. And we were very aggressive users of the State Revolving Fund. And I have to thank my longtime friend and colleague and benefactor, David Zimmer, who's also a speaker today, and the NJDEP. And I know Charlie Jenkins is on the call as well. And he and his predecessor, Gene Chuber, were amazing helps on the New Jersey DEP side. New Jersey DEP and New Jersey iBank, funded nearly all of Camden County MUA State Revolving Fund programs. Well, they funded all of our infrastructure programs, which were through the State Revolving Fund. And by using the SRF, the iBank program, we were able to significantly upgrade our wastewater treatment plant, expand our regional sewer system to help underserved communities throughout the county that had been unsewered, upgrade Camden City's combined sewer system, plant green infrastructure, get off the grid, put in green energy projects that got us off the grid, and all do that without raising rates. And in fact, because we held the rate for so many years, thanks to the iBank program, our rate in 2020 was 40% lower than it was in 1996, if you count inflation, because it didn't go up for 25 years, but while inflation did, and that was entirely due to the fact that we were able to upgrade our system, expand it, and lower our operating costs by more than the annual debt service from the State Revolving Fund loan, because the loan program is so effective in having a lower annual debt service cost spread out over a longer period of time. So many thanks to David and the iBank, many thanks to Charlie and the NJDEP for all that it did for the residents of Camden County. It enabled us to improve our environmental performance, protect the public health, and keep rates low, which obviously especially benefits low-income households. So the State Revolving Fund is a tremendous program, and now it's even better given the investment from the federal government to allow more principal forgiveness, more funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Justice 40 initiative. So it's even more attractive than it was when we were doing it using it from 1996 to 2020. However, I also witnessed during my time in Camden that underserved communities like the city of Camden itself have a lot of barriers to getting this funding. I mean, Camden, for example, during that period of time, didn't have any grant writers. They had only one engineer for the whole city, and so they lacked the capacity to apply on their own in many cases. And some of the barriers that I see to applying for the State Revolving Fund include: one, less resource communities may not even know about the program, or two, they may think if they know about it, they may think it's just another loan program. They don't realize that that's much lower interest rate, much longer period of time for payback, and also that you don't have to start paying back until the construction is finished, which is another huge win for a lower resource community. So it's not just another loan program. It's really, and especially now with the additional principal forgiveness opportunity, it really is a grant program, and it's a big advantage to use it. But we need to educate our underserved communities that may not know that. And then third, so my thought is that, and what Moonshot is seeking to do in its role as an environmental finance center, is to bring our underserved, lower resource communities to the program and then through it. So the first step, of course, is to bring them to it by telling them about it, making sure they're aware of its benefits. And then second, to bring them through it. Another thing that less resource communities may have less of a likelihood to be able to do is to, one, diagnose the solutions to the problems that they have, or they may not be aware of opportunities to improve things. It may not be a problem per se, but maybe they could lower their costs or improve their performance beyond what they're doing, but they may not be aware of those opportunities. And so the idea is to diagnose solutions for these communities. And that's something that we at Moonshot, I think, are very well equipped to do, because our team is comprised of former public sector officials like myself, who, as I said, worked in Camden for many years. And so we're able to identify solutions that have worked for either ourselves directly or that we're familiar with in the sector. Real quick, I mentioned the EPA did a study of what were the biggest barriers to underserved communities in improving their infrastructure. Of course, the first was money and resources, but the second was the fact that our underserved communities are often not networked. And the fact is that they don't belong to the association. So for example, if New York is doing something, Chicago is hearing about it and they're able to adapt it or implement it. Most of the innovations that we implemented while I was in Camden, I borrowed from someone else and learned and was able to adapt, because we were networked and we did see what others were doing, but the majority of the underserved lower income communities are not. So we at Moonshot see ourselves very much as pollinators, bringing ideas and solutions that have worked in other places and helping our underserved communities to adapt them to their own specific situation. And then the last thing is that they may not have the capacity to go through the program. And even though we are very lucky in New Jersey, and I've been working in other states and getting a real sense of how lucky we are, that the New Jersey DEP and the iBank really work hard to make it as easy as possible for community to go through it. But I know in other states, it is not as easy. And even in New Jersey, for a really underserved community that might not have an engineer at all, it still might be difficult to go through the process of going through the permitting process, putting out an RFP to procure a consulting engineer, et cetera. And those are the kinds of things that we at Moonshot are very experienced with, having done it directly ourselves in implementing projects. So our hope is, again, to identify communities that need help, to bring them to the program, to the SRF program, and then bring them through it so that they can realize the same kind of benefits that the residents of Camden County and Camden City were able to enjoy during my time there, thanks to the New Jersey iBank and New Jersey DEP. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andy. Really appreciate that. And just as a reminder for folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and I can take a look at them for consideration to ask to the panel. And then with that, we're moving on to the third panelist. So I'd like to introduce Tess.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I want to apologize. I'm sorry, are we showing slides? Awesome, thank you so much. I want to just quickly apologize. I'm in an airport, and if there's any disruptive background noise, let me know and I'll pause briefly or wrap up quick. Like Lee said, my name is Tess Clark. I am coming on behalf of Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center, and I'm really excited to sort of echo the comments of my colleagues, especially Andy, who we work with as part of our Environmental Finance Center programming. I'm here to talk today about our technical assistance experience and approach at SU ESC. And you can see here that I've put some basic about us information on my slide. We've been around since 1993. And at the start, when we were a two-person group, we really focused on the how to solve the how to pay problem of environmental protection and improvement. And this pertains to EPA Region 2, which is New York, New Jersey, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. Like I said, we started out really focusing on funding and finance, connecting communities with the correct funding, researching the right tools, identifying new mechanisms for financing. But since then, we've really expanded, and we now support communities in a much more broad and far-reaching way. We've worked on projects that include things like outreach and education, climate resilience planning, project management support, and much, much more. So as an example, I'll say as a lighter touch assistance, I've helped communities just fill in PDFs that weren't working well for them. But I've also done things like performed an organizational capacity assessment to support a community identifying future staffing needs or workforce development. We try to help folks intervene at a point that would make them ready or able to get funding, and that would help them on the road to getting something like an SRF. Next slide, please. Awesome, and I wanted to acknowledge that the term technical assistance can sometimes feel a little jargony. I've felt that myself, and I wanted to share my perspective on how it can be helpful to communities with this graphic. One thing that we do is collaboration, communication, and support. Oftentimes, reaching out to a technical assistant might feel like an investment of your time, and I can understand that. But often it's well worth it, because in the end, if we can't help you, we will connect you to someone who can. It might be somebody on this call. You know, we work together often. I've worked with funders, I've worked with Andy. We would do what it takes to get you to the right person, even if it means you don't necessarily work with us. And here you can also see I've listed some examples of TA providers that maybe you haven't thought of. Things like the National Rural Water Association. All of those folks do things that convene people, that bring people together, that can support you on the road to building partnerships or to getting eventually in line to get funding that you're after. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to provide some higher level details for our approach and our support. We really focus on helping you tackle your water and infrastructure challenges head on. We want to always start with a consultation to hear from you where your need really lies. Our assistance is free for communities in EPA Region 2. Some of our lighter assistance might be connecting you with a different provider. And if it is more in-depth assistance, we usually take some time to really do more of an in-depth process, similar to what Andy and Diana described. And our services starting this summer will be a little bit more robust. We're working together with many other providers to really support some of those bigger in-depth assistances. And that team will include engineers, funding and finance experts, community engagement facilitators, rural development specialists, and more. And next slide, please. Lastly, I just wanted to just flash my contact info. I'm sorry if there's a little bit of noise right now. So you can contact me directly if you have questions about assistance. We can always make the time to talk, even if you may not eventually need something from us. There might be someone you know who can help. I also wanted to just quickly call out EPA's Water Technical Assistance page, which is also a really great place to start, as EPA is really advancing and moving forward a lot of technical assistance efforts. All right, it's a little loud, so I'm going to stop there, and I hope that that gave you some food for thought.
Thank you, Tess. And we really appreciate you doing this at the airport as well. So thank you so much. The next panelist I'd like to introduce is Pat. You're muted.
Sorry. Hi, everyone again. I'm Pat Gardner. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Water Resource Management in the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And the State Revolving Fund program is part of that program. So my slides. Yeah, I don't know, I was going to bring up my presentation.
Yes, it
Okay.
closed out all of a sudden, so hold on,
Okay.
let me get them back.
I'll just use this time to remind folks to input questions in the chat if they have any at this point.
Okay, I'm having a bit of trouble.
Okay, that's okay. I mean, I can do it without the slides. And then they'll be available for folks, later on. And again, my name is Pat Gardner. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the Water Resource Management Program in the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the DEP's Technical Assistance Program. As everyone knows, the bill provided a lot of money for the state revolving funds, but we're also allowed to take a portion of that money to develop program implementation. So the DEP is using these set-aside funds to further develop our technical assistance program, which we are now calling NJTAP. Through these programs, systems can work with either the iBank or DEP and directly with third-party service providers in order to address their specific needs and the needs of the communities they serve. The goal is to bring more projects and project sponsors into the SRF program by assisting systems create everything they need in order to successfully apply for funding, helping them through the loan application process, and by identifying and securing potential sponsors for future project funding through increased outreach and community involvement. And as we all know, that technical assistance program is really not one size fits all. So we try to cater that program to meet the system specific needs. So now I'm going to go through some. David will be talking next, and he can go through what some of the iBank technical assistance programs. I'm going to focus on the drinking water DEP program, technical assistance program. So the first one I'm going to talk about is there's an community engagement one, and the consultant will work with the DEP to identify disadvantaged communities and their water systems that are willing and able to benefit from water infrastructure improvement and also willing to accept early technical assistance. And their role is to act as the liaison for the water system, communicating with the DEP and iBank to facilitate discussions and planning sessions. I'm on slide 3. Thanks. Okay, right there. Thank you. So the public outreach contractor will engage communities and their water systems and provide community education, guidance, communication expertise, and assistance to prepare communities for water bank applications and project review requirements. Next slide. The next technical assistance is the lead service line replacement. In 2021, Governor Murphy signed a law which required New Jersey community water systems to identify and replace all lead service lines by 2031. It also required the submittal of annual updated service line inventories, progress reports, and lead service line replacements plan. And one of the goals of the New Jersey TAP is to help systems meet these requirements. We are working with our third-party technical assistance provider, CDM Smith, to provide this assistance at no cost to the water system. The first 3 systems that are working with CDM Smith are Atlantic City MUA, Freehold Borough Water Department, and Salem Water Department. And I believe Cape May is the next system to join up to that program. In addition, we are one of the first states collaborating with US EPA on their lead service line replacement accelerator program. And EPA will be working with 10 systems in New Jersey to help them through the process of identification and replacement of their lead service lines. Next slide. The next technical assistance program is geared for small systems. And by small systems, we are talking about systems that serve less than 10,000. And the plan here is to provide technical assistance from project conception to planning and design. This assistance is also provided by a third-party technical service provider, the New Jersey Water Association, and systems that participate are assigned a professional engineer who can conduct an assessment, asset management evaluation, make recommendations on addressing the system's needs and deficiencies, complete planning documents, and obtaining necessary permits for projects. This type of technical assistance will also cover the planning and design costs in advance of attaining a loan through the SRF. Next slide. There's also a general engineering assistance program, and this is to help these systems evaluate their technical, managerial, and financial capacity and prioritize infrastructure improvement needs. Like the engineering assistance for small systems, this idea is that once an evaluation of the system as a whole is performed, necessary projects can be better identified and prioritized. Our third-party provider for this portion of the program is Arcadis, and the first two systems who will be working with them and utilizing this type of assistance are Gloucester City Water Department and Westville Water Department. Next slide. This is just how you would supply. We do have the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan website on the DEP's. It's on the main page of the DEP website. You can get to that. And there's also links in there about how to apply for this program. Next slide. And this is the technical assistance programs request form. That's also part of that website. And I believe we took this from Syracuse's program. I think it looks almost exactly the same as theirs. So this is another one that we use from by looking at what other folks had. So you just need to fill out your information. You can check as many categories as you want. And also, even though our focus is on disadvantaged communities, even if you don't meet that criteria, you should still apply for assistance if you need it. By applying for the program, it gives us information about the problems you're trying to solve and will help make us aware of systems and communities issues so that we can continue to develop and improve the program. And it also gives us a better idea on the amount of work that still needs to happen out in the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. And then our final panelist today that will be introducing with the iBank, David.
Sure, thanks, Lee. My name is David Zimmer. I'm the executive director of the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. We have partnered now for almost 4 decades with the DEP on helping local government units and private water companies finance large capital projects. All the technical assistance programs that have been described by Pat and the previous speakers have a common goal, and that's facilitating project sponsors financing the ultimate end game through the state's SRF program. You hear SRF a lot, the State Revolving Fund. That's EPA, Congress's program. In New Jersey, it's called the Water Bank. That's the partnership between Pat's team and the iBank's team. We jointly administer that program. And like I said, for almost the past 4 decades, a good bit of long-term project financing for TA eligible project sponsors, thanks to the bill law, comes in the form of principal forgiveness loans. So all this technical assistance is going to be provided to disadvantaged communities, to very certain borrowers, free of charge. And the end game is to take those capital projects and get them financed through the New Jersey Water Bank. And a lot of that money is going to be provided as principal forgiveness, fancy term for grant. Some of those funds are going to be done as loan funds at advantageous rates. So 75% of the money will come at 0% from the department and 25% from the iBank at our AAA rate. Our base program is 50% of your funds come from Pat and her team at 0%, and 50% come from us at AAA. So no matter how you slice it, these are very, very cheap funds. And now is the time when you have capital projects that need to get done to take advantage of this. So like every other TA program discussed earlier, you should want to know how to access the free TA support being offered by the DEP iBank collaboration. But you should also want to know how eventually to access the water bank funds, including principal forgiveness, once you and your TA team have identified the capital projects that you want to fund through the water bank. So let's first discuss the DEP iBank Technical Assistance Program and how to access that program. Eligible participants, disadvantaged communities with either clean water or drinking water projects. That's our focus for the TA program that Pat and I are combining resources on. The services that we're going to offer, we've gone out and we've procured 2 pools of consultants that will work with your community together. The first pool is an operators pool. There's 4 firms in this pool that have expertise in operating water systems: Black & Veatch, Griftelis, RVE, T&M. So the department and the iBank will get together when we find a community that we're going to offer technical assistance to. We'll put out an RFP. We'll choose one of those firms. They will help you do preliminary system assessments, including looking at your processes and assets, doing a fiscal condition assessment. And that'll include your rate structure, its design, and the capability of that system to prioritize those capital projects relative to the available water bank financing, right? So if you've got different priorities, but the funding is going to be more advantageous for project number 3 or 4, maybe we have project number 3 or 4 jump in front of project 1 because the money is available to you now at principal forgiveness funds. All of that will be worked out in collaboration with the department, the iBank, and your TA team. And then also reviewing the different financing options, including asset acquisition timing, like I just talked about, and alternative sources of funds. The second pool of consultants is a public outreach / engagement pool. And we've gone out and we've pre-qualified 6 firms for that: KPMG, Michael Baker International, New Jersey Future, Paulus, Sokolowski and Sartor, Tetra Tech, and 2020 Public Affairs. They're going to help you folks develop educational materials, facilitate efforts to distribute and educate the public with those materials about the benefits of upgrading the water system by participating in the Water Bank's financing program, and assisting with applying for water bank financing, including the application submission, as well as navigating the water bank requirement and data requests. Now, Pat and I would tell you H2 loans, it's as good as sliced bread, that it's easy to get through, but we also understand that it's a little bit nerve-wracking, and the first time through it, you probably need some hand-holding. So this public outreach engagement group is going to be doing that for you to ensure we get your projects in, they get financed, they get completed. To apply, Pat just went through this. If anybody hasn't gone to Commissioner LaTourrette's WIP page, just type in NJDEP WIIP. It'll take you right to it. It's a phenomenal website. It's very easy to navigate. There's a bunch of tabs on top. Just go to the technical assistance page. The form to fill out, Pat just showed you 5 minutes ago, that's on there, as well as information about the different TA programs. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about the water bank program. Eligible partners, anybody who's received technical assistance from the department or the iBank, one of our 3 programs, you're already qualified, which means, generally speaking, you're a public clean water or drinking water system, you're a private water purveyor who holds a PWSID from DEP, or your certain 501c3 water systems. But I'll throw a caveat there. It's like colleges. That would be a new category for the water bank program. So while they're legally allowed, we haven't made a loan to such systems. So those are the eligible participants. The services we offer include construction loans, short-term loans, long-term financing, and then principal forgiveness. And the financing associated costs through project completion, right? So the terms we offer, if you haven't come through our program before, your short-term loan is 3 full years for construction, and then up to 2 additional years for planning and design. And as far as the rate on the short-term loan program, the construction program, right now, it's approximately our iBank cost of funds, which is reset monthly. So not that this will mean a whole lot to some of you, but if you're in finance and you go out and you borrow money through a bond anticipation note, right now, those are currently around 3.5%. The cost of funds for coming in for a short-term loan for the water bank, right now, it's less than 0.5%. So it's 3% below where AA rated bands trade right now in the municipal market. Again, you don't have to be a finance wizard to understand that if you can borrow money 3% cheaper for the term of your construction loan before you go to long-term financing, that's a good deal. And then any funds that you don't get as principal forgiveness, we convert those into long-term loans at construction completion. And the base rate, like I said, is 50% of the AAA rate. Our advantageous rate, which is mostly geared toward disadvantaged communities, is 25% of the AAA rate. But again, a lot of these funds are going to be made available to disadvantaged communities as principal forgiveness funds. So how do you access and come into the program? As far as the full description of what's available, you can find that in our intended use plan that's on DEP's webpage. Again, NJDEP space WIIP. And right up at the top, next to technical assistance, you'll find IUP and project priority list. That describes what money's available and at what rates. There's a summary that we have on the iBank webpage, which is njib.gov. Easiest way to do this is, it's my website. I do this all the time. Go up in the top right corner where the search bar, just type in brochure. Hit the magnifying glass. It'll redirect you to program publications, and then you can click on publications, and it's like the second or third group down. You'll see our 2 trifolds for the clean water or drinking water. So again, DEP WIP page, look for IUP and project priority list. Or if you want the summary, the shorter version, the 2-page version, go to the njib.gov and just type in brochure up in the top corner, and all that information is available to you. That's it for me for now. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate the detailed information regarding the financing options. So with that, just one last reminder, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, because now we're entering into the question and answer section of this. Now we are short on time, given that this event does end at 3:15. So depending on how long this goes, we'll make room for between 2, 3, maybe 4 questions we'll try to fit in. But at this point, I'd like to pass it off to Rich, who will ask the first couple of questions.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you to the panelists. Great job. You already answered many of our questions. I was sitting here literally crossing them off as I was listening to the presentations. Well, just some follow-up for the group, and these are open to anybody on the panel. Small and historically underserved communities are particularly challenged, as we all know. They have limited, sometimes no staff. So you mentioned all these programs that are available, and they're great programs that help them through the program. But are you seeking them out, or do they have to find you? That's my first question.
Well, we're definitely seeking them out. I mean, one of the challenges, like I mentioned when I was describing the barriers to the State Revolving Fund, is that a lot of the communities don't know about the program at all. You know, and then despite the efforts of the state to get the word out, some of the non-networked, smaller, like especially maybe not so much in New Jersey, which is a very densely populated, but especially across the country, a lot of communities don't know about the State Revolving Fund, and then those that do know about it don't necessarily know about its benefits. So, and then the other thing is they're also just trying to keep their head above water, pardon the pun. So it's really important, if we want to make sure that those who need help get the help, we want to bring them to the program and then through it, as opposed to waiting for the squeaky wheel.
Thank you, Andy. Pat, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, we were also reaching out directly, like we are calling systems ourselves, based on the list that we've developed that looked at disadvantaged communities, systems that we know have compliance issues, and we've been calling them directly and trying to get them to participate. And it is interesting to me that they don't all immediately say, yes, like I'll take this free assistance from you. We've had ones that turned us down. And all those systems that I talked about, like for the lead service line replacement between EPA's accelerator and ours, those 15 systems were all reached out to by the department to begin with to get them to come in. So we had to talk to maybe 20 or 20, more than 20 to get, at least now we're up to like 14 or 15 that are in right now. The same for the general engineering. So we are really making a real effort of going out and reaching out to systems.
Great, thank you. Tess?
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that a lot of the systems that are particularly small that we've worked with, they're so small that it's hard for them to even find the time to engage with technical assistance. And it's often our job to make that process as reduce the burden there as much as we can by taking on all of the scheduling and the sending of documents and making the agendas and calling people to make sure they're coming, and that is often one of the hardest hurdles to get over, and it can cause the process to take longer than sometimes it is ideal. But investing the time and letting it take a few months to maybe a year often pays off. Just some extra.
Right. Thank you all for those answers. I think it's important to understand that these communities do exist, and often they don't have the resources available, but you making them available and contacting them about them and explaining them is so important to them taking the next steps to the process. So talking about next steps, this might be more a New Jersey centered question. The SRF program isn't just an application, as we all know. Mr. Zimmer mentioned the H2O loans program. These things can be complicated, involves many steps, a lot of coordination with both the iBank and DEP staff. What other tips do you have for applicants in trying to navigate this process? David? I think you're muted, David.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Yeah. So h2loans.com is the first step for everybody that wants to participate in the program, right? It is H2 Loans is the main conduit for both department staff and iBank staff to interact with our project sponsors that become borrowers and all of their consultants. So people should memorize that, h2loans.com, right? So when you have your technical assistant team is going to help identify the projects that you want to finance. Easy thing is, you know what? If you're lost, call us. There isn't a person at the department that works for Pat or the person at the iBank that works for me that won't take that phone call. And if they can't help you find somebody that's next to them or in their vicinity that won't spend the time that they need to make sure that your project is attended to. All right, so you're going to come into H2 Loans and you're going to need help trying to figure out the first time, what does this mean? What are they asking me here, etc. There is a person by the name of Mary Pearsall, Pearsall. Mary Pearsall is the end all and be all when it comes to H2 Loans. Her phone number is 609-219-8601. And by the way, she loves to get phone calls and chat with people. So she's really terrific. That is a name people want to remember. That's a phone number people want to remember. Again, if you get lost and you can't get a hold of somebody that, a name like myself or somebody, Charles, or somebody that works for Pat, Mary, you want to call Mary and Mary will help you. And outside of that, it really is communicate, communicate, communicate. If you get a deficiency notice from either Charles or one of the senior members of Charles' team, like Karen Cole on the environmental side. It is important that you attend to that deficiency notice ASAP. Otherwise, your project gets stuck. Probably 7 times out of 10, projects that are sitting on the shelf are because we've sent notices to borrowers and the borrowers haven't responded to us. Now, you could say, well, how come you guys don't ping us back? And that's a great question, but I would ask people to understand that at any given point in time, we have over 300 projects, well over 300 projects, north of $1 billion that we're trying to manage, right? So it's not that we can always, like, once a week go, oh, I need to call this person because I gave them a deficiency. So it is to everybody's benefit to make sure we're talking to each other as often as possible. And again, if you have any questions, pick up the phone. Right? I'm like my teenage kids. Don't text me. Right? I'm a phone call away. I want to talk to you.
I agree. Mary always picks up the phone. She's very helpful.
Yeah.
Charles, you want to add on to what David said?
Sure, and I agree with everything David said. When projects are submitted into H2 loans, there's a box that's entitled Request Pre-Planning Meeting. That pre-planning meeting happens at the very beginning of the process. I and the other program managers here at DEP, as well as David's chief operating officer, are on 99+% of those calls. We give consistent input on what the likely terms and eligibility will be for a particular project. We go over the steps of the project. We establish recurring coordination meetings if needed. So it could be a small project, but an inexperienced borrower will set up every 2-week or monthly calls until everything is progressing the way it should be. Or if it's a very large and complicated project, again, we'll set up recurring calls and try to keep everything moving on track. And again, as David said, we're only a phone call away. No text, please, but email works as well. And just so everyone knows my part in the process, I'm under Pat Gardner. I'm the Assistant Director of Municipal Finance and Construction Element. So we are the planning and design, loan application review, construction management. David is the money guy, as you heard earlier, as well as our biggest supporter of our DEP efforts to get these needs met financially. Thank you.
All right. Andy, you have some additional tips to add?
Yeah, I've actually been put on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, as a utility manager who's an applicant and a borrower, and then now technical. And everything that David says is true. Especially about Mary Pearsall, by the way. I remember being on the phone with her at 6 o'clock at night, and she was helping me guide through step by step how to get the application in. And she's a wonderful person, and just there's a lot of great people in both the DEP and the iBank, including David and Charles. And there's so many people out there that helped through the years, and both are definitely there to help. My advice would be as follows. First of all, that some of as a utility manager, and sometimes speaking like at different New Jersey utility associations like NJAA or WA, utility people, I would hear them say, well, here are the we don't want to borrow from the iBank, one, because it's just another loan, and I've already explained why that, and David did it far better than I, why it is not just another loan, it is really a grant, and a significant one too. But second, they'll say, oh, it takes more time. And that is really not true either, because nearly every one of the permitting requirements or project requirements for a non-funded loan versus an SRF funded loan it's basically the same. You still need to get permits whether you go through the SRF or the iBank or not. I mean, there's the marginal amount of effort is very negligible, and especially compared to the financial benefits. So you still need to get most of the same permits and approvals as before. And then the third thing is, oh, it takes longer. Well, actually, I found that the DEP and the iBank really accelerated, not preferentially, but the projects were of higher importance. That's why we're going for the funding, and we found our projects went through. So I mean, there's absolutely no reason not to go for the funding. And as I explained with my example in Camden, it actually enabled us to hold rates lower by reducing our operating costs. So the no action alternative wasn't better either.
Great.
Thanks.
I think that concept of it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder and more expensive is a harbinger of old. But really, ever since the department and the iBank created H2 loans and went digital, the expediency for getting reviews done, getting requisitions. So here's just a real simple statistic on why H2 loans has turned out to be such a really terrific enterprise application for our borrowers. When you put in a requisition, you upload everything into H2 loans, all of your invoices that are electronic, you just upload them into the system, you fill out the form, DEP's 101 form. Upon submittals to the department and the reviews, because it's all electronic and nobody has to wait for paper filings or interoffice mail for files. I have literally signed off and had the bank wire funds from and this is like a $2.5 million requisition, which had a lot of line items in it. 2 days after a borrower submitted a requisition into the system, DEP's Engineering Construction Management Group approved it, came over to the iBank's finance and accounting folks. They approved it. It came up to me 2 days. I would say that our average payment is somewhere between 7 and 10 days. And before COVID, we were somewhere between, let's just call it 21 days, give or take. That's just on requisitions, right? So we're not talking about all of the reviews that the environmental team does so much more efficiently, all the technical reviews that Charles and his engineering staff do. So again, anybody that hasn't been in this program in the last 5 to 7 years does not know this program. Your engineers, your lawyers, et cetera, beat on them. This is not the water bank of old, right? We compete with banks. We compete with Wall Street in terms of being able to get you cheaper funds as fast as our competitors do. Like as a finance guy, I can't pound the table hard enough on that. Andy, you're right. There is no excuse. Anybody that's going to finance a water project in the state that is at least $200,000 in size should be looking anywhere than the SRF.
And in most cases, that turnaround is going to be quicker than you see in any municipality in New Jersey. So that's great to hear. Lee, how are we doing on time? We have time for one more?
We have time for one more question, but we only have 9 minutes left. So we need to make this one a quick one.
Great. This is a simple one. Talking about trends, traditionally, the SRF program's been for water infrastructure improvements, things like aging pipes, aging buildings and infrastructure treatment plants. What are you seeing today with the emergence of new contaminants like PFAS and lead? Are those projects overtaking the traditional forms of projects, or are we seeing a kind of balance between the two?
I mean, I would say that lead in drinking water is certainly catching up, right? And especially in New Jersey, thanks to the governor's very timely requirement that everything be repaired in 10 years. But I think emerging contaminants are a while off. They're lagging behind. And some of it's going to require technology, because it's going to be like treatment plant upgrades that, maybe are not necessarily able to do on large scale right now. I mean, one thing I think that's really important, I know Pat and her team are on it, is in parallel pushing on industrial pretreatment. I know that's not the topic here, but in other words, to get at it at the source in parallel with upgrades at the at the end, at the receiving end. And I think those two things are needed in parallel.
I would agree with Andy. Most of what we're seeing in our engagements is more along the traditional side of things. However, as an EFC, we're probably going to be focused more on lead service line replacement, and expect that there's sort of a lag there, and there's been some waiting around for some program changes to occur across the country, and we expect that there's going to be an uptick in that. That there's definitely momentum building for that. But we're seeing the same thing, Andy, with emerging contaminants, that there's a little bit of other things are getting prioritized over that.
Pat? Are you muted, Pat?
Okay. I mean, I think we're seeing just an increase in projects overall, but since New Jersey has drinking water MCLs for PFAS, we see a lot of projects coming in. for PFAS funding right now. Like it's not lagging behind. They're required. There's about 80 systems that have a violation that are required to install treatment or take some other action. So over the next couple of years, we expect to see, and unfortunately, Rich knows this very well, some high dollar amount projects come in to treat for PFAS. So we're really in the middle of that right now, as well as the lead service line replacement costs. So New Jersey's kind of in a position of, have all this extra money. So a lot of folks are coming in with other projects that maybe they've been holding off on or just part of their routine maintenance kind of work. And then at the same time, we're seeing, increased number of projects coming in for unregulated, they're really regulated contaminants in New Jersey as well. So it's servicing.
And just to add on to what Andy and David said, for utility like Bridgewater that I serve, without the iBank, the rate shock that would have occurred to the consumer on the basis of the expense that has to be put into the system would have been much greater if we didn't leverage the loans for the iBank, and the principal forgiveness that's available as well. So I want to thank all the panelists again. Lee, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat that you want to ask.
Well, unfortunately, we only have 5 minutes left, and we have to close out. But I do want to thank everyone for participating, for submitting their questions. We will do the best we can to answer any questions in the chat that we weren't able to get to. But again, thank you, Rich, for being an amazing question moderator on this. And I just want to thank our panelists again. It's amazing to have so many experts on this issue to join us for this event, to very much educate the public and water system operators on these amazing routes when we're talking about outreach, financing options, and everything in between. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to the commissioner to do the final reflections and let the public know about some upcoming events. Commissioner Patricia Lindsay Harvey.
Okay, so sorry about that. It's, sometimes I have to remember I'm a commissioner. When you said commissioner, I thought you were talking to the DEP commissioner. Okay, so some upcoming events that we have going on here. I'm sorry, I don't have that right here.
While you're looking, Patricia, I just want to say thanks to New Jersey Future for your leadership on this. Great job, Lee. And it's a pleasure serving with such great panelists, people have been friends with for a long time. Thank you.
All right, so we have some upcoming events for Jersey Waterworks. It's a membership meeting July 12th at Rutgers Student Center in New Brunswick. Hope to see you all there. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And registration will be open soon. So we really want you to take advantage of that. We're all going to be there and we're going to be looking for you.
And with that, I suppose we can conclude. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please feel free to catch the recording when it goes public, and have a great day.